Following President Trump's bombing of Iran, his former Vice President Mike Pence came out in support of the president, writing an opinion piece in the Washington Examiner declaring that justice is finally being served in Tehran. Former Vice President Mike Pence joins us this morning, and it's good to see you, Mr. Vice President.
Yeah, good to see you both. Thanks for having me on.
You certainly have not been a rubber stamp for a lot of the things that President Trump has done, but in this, and I was interested when I saw you were going to be on, in where you were going to stand on this. And I think your viewpoint is, and if you were a complete absolutist, you would say 47 years, how can you call this a rush to taking action, and that you need some type of tipping point to get you to this point? We theoretically had cause and reason many different times over to maybe say, look, enough is enough here.
Well, we did, and people talk about starting a war. I think what President Trump has done, what our armed forces are doing with a brilliant execution as we speak, is trying to finish a war that started 47 years ago, literally, the claiming of American hostages, the 79 revolution, the attack on the Marine Corps barracks that claimed the lives of 220 Marines and 20 more service members. And all through those decades, I think it's accurate to say that the United States has been taking the fight to the tentacles of Iran. We fought against the insurgency during the Iraq War, which was fully sponsored and underwritten and provisioned by the mullahs in Tehran, the Houthis, Hamas, Hezbollah. But as the president did last year with Operation Midnight Hammer, we've at last taken the fight directly to the heart of terrorism in the world, and I think it bodes well. I think it seems to me we've got an opportunity here, in a very real sense, to reset the balance across the Arab world, an Arab world that has long recognized that Iran is the greatest threat to peace and security for all of them, for their neighbors in the world. And so I'm incredibly proud of our armed forces for the extraordinary planning that was done. But I give President Trump all the credit in the world for having the guts to pull the trigger on this and finally take the fight to the leading state sponsor of terrorism in the world.
We've all been witnessing the what everyone is talking about. Obviously, the Journal weighing in their op-ed pages that even the administration seems to have fallen into the trap, because they're getting some pressure from both the left, certain parts of the right, and the media about what precipitated this action now. Why did it have to be now? And Secretary of State Rubio made a comment about Israel, and then the president seemed to have to try to walk back that it wasn't because of Israel. But if you have been negotiating for how long, in earnest, especially with Jared Kushner and Witkoff in the last month or whatever, and you're not getting anywhere, and you get an opportunity at that point where they're all gathered together, and the intelligence tells you that, and you get a chance to do that, after Witkoff has said there were enough, the Iranians were bragging, there's enough uranium for 11 bombs enriched that they still have. So people immediately say, what happened to Midnight Hammer obliterating their so you can't win one way or the other. They're going to say, you said it was obliterated, so it wasn't obliterated. It would have never been. We didn't know where that uranium was, did we, at the time?
Well, you really gave a great summary there. And I just have to go back to, I was at the president's side when he made the decision to take out the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. And one thing I can tell you, having served alongside President Trump, is he's not afraid of making a decision, but he's somebody that believes that decisions ought to come at the right time. And I think, as I've observed from the outside of this Trump administration, Joe, what it seemed to me is after 4 years of the Biden administration that had emboldened our enemies with that disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, that resulted in Russia's latest invasion of Ukraine 4 years ago, the horrific events of October 7th, sponsored by Iran with Hamas in Israel. And all the while, the Biden administration was literally begging the Iranians to come back to the table in an Iran nuclear deal, all the while that they're literally building thousands upon thousands of rockets and ballistic missiles, developing a nuclear program. And when the new Trump administration came in, they engaged diplomatically. But when that failed, the president took the historic action of sending U.S. forces directly against nuclear forces. Then a year of diplomacy again to say, number one, you can never possess a nuclear weapon. You need to dial down and respond to concerns about your ballistic missile program. And also, I have read on the table properly was you can no longer continue to sow violence across the region through all these various surrogate organizations. When they refused to do that, and the opportunity presented itself to move, I just fully support the decision the president made in this case, and not just that he made the decision, but I compare this military action to the way that George Herbert Walker Bush moved in the Persian Gulf War, putting mass on point, overwhelming force, and I think it's the reason why we have seen the extraordinary level of success, not without cost. And we grieve for the loss of 6 American service members.
A son and a son-in-law, both fighter pilots in the military.
Well, we are. We're just among many families that have family members in the service. My heart goes out to the families of those 6 service members today. But at the end of the day, I think we have an opportunity here to restore deterrence in the wider world. But also, I sense that the president's objective here is in a very essentially to degrade the ability of the Iranian regime to project force against its people and externally, and create the conditions where the people of Iran can reclaim their freedom.
The New York Times is reporting this morning that Iranian operatives have reached out to the CIA to discuss potential terms for a ceasefire, for what it would take to reach some sort of agreement. It's a very strange way to see any sort of offering come about. But when 40 to 50 of the top leaders have been wiped out, I guess you're going to see some strange things come about. What do you think of that? What would you think it would take to resolve things at this point?
Well, I don't have any information to support that. But that reporting to me is a hopeful sign that there may be people in the military structure, lower level, that are recognizing the futility of continuing to fight America and Israel, and a widening list of Arab neighbors, and are coming to the table. And I think, as the president has said, he's willing to talk, but at the end of the day, I think we don't want to make the mistake, to some extent, I think, that first Bush administration made in the Persian Gulf War, is they didn't finish the job. We ended up having to go back 10 years later. I think we've got to continue to unleash our military and support Israel's efforts and those of our allies in the region to essentially destroy the ability of this evil regime's capacity to oppress its people, threaten its neighbors. And then, what I've come to understand over 25 years around these issues, the Foreign Affairs Committee and my years in the White House, is that the population of Iran is actually a very modern population, very Western-oriented. They love sports. I think 50% of the population is under the age of 30. And simply, you saw the way people bravely took to the streets after the first of the year. Some 30,000 were cut down by this regime in the latest effort to suppress their people. I really do believe that the people of Iran are ready to step forward and are ready to join the family of nations, and we just need to make sure we create the conditions and erode the ability of that terrorist regime.
Regime change needs to be an objective here.
I really do believe at the end of the day That's what we've recognized here for many years, and that's what Israel certainly knows. That the regime itself has been.
He was there 30 years. This guy, and all if you add up both Iraq-Iran wars and everything else, I mean, we're talking millions of people probably that indirectly could be tied to this evil person that was in charge. And how long can you talk and listen to the other side of the negotiations and just know, basically, if their lips are moving, they're probably lying, right? I mean, or dissembling or distorting or hiding or somehow, trying to achieve their goals without being, honest about it. And sooner or later, I don't know.
Well,
we hope that it's not long lasting and that the objectives are, because no one wants to get bogged down. We're all still we have that muscle memory of the dead enders in Iraq and the IEDs and everything else, and hopefully that's on it. But Mr. Vice President, it was great having you on this morning.
Yeah, thank you both.
Thank you.